So again, welcome again to establishing a data-driven marketing strategy for your agency. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be here for 45 minutes or so, depending on questions, and very excited to discuss this particular topic, which is very near and dear to me. I'm Stefanie Altman. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Agency Revolution. So big baseball fan. I love it when mustard wins the hot dog race. And other than that, kind of always thinking about marketing. And I'd like to welcome Chris Cline, our guest today. Chris, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the chance to join you today, and really enjoy getting a chance to continue to build our personal and professional working relationship. Stefanie, it's been really great to get to know you and to really be energized by your passion around data and marketing and the support that Agency Revolution brings to us. But I'm currently the agency. I work with the Agents Council for Technology to National Big I, and it's a pretty cool program. Recently made a career switch in the grand scheme of things about 18 months ago after 28 years on the carrier side, and loved what the Big I was doing, sitting in a very neutral spot in the middle of the industry with the opportunity to bring together multiple stakeholders, member agencies, technology providers, and carriers to try to create a unified voice around a bunch of meaningful topics, but in this case, around how technology can enable and support an independent agency bring their unique strategies to life. And that's really the gist of what we'll talk about today. I didn't get a hot dog photograph because they never let mayonnaise race, and I don't know that anybody puts mayonnaise on hot dogs, but at any rate, I'll digress and let you take things back. Appreciate it, Stefanie.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again so much, Chris, for your time and for your excitement about this. So just to kind of lay the scene, and one of the reasons that I reached out to Chris specifically to come here and talk about these topics today was that about a month ago, I was on an Agents Council for Technology panel, kind of discussing data more broadly across the insurance industry, but for me, kind of bringing the marketing perspective to that panel. And Chris was our moderator, and he just asked some really great questions. And as we were kind of walking out, I was thinking there's a lot more to talk about just in terms of data and marketing, and really how it ties into the rest of what's going on with agents right now. And I thought, you know what, like, let me see if Chris is game to do one of these webinars. And so here we are, really kind of built off that great conversation. So some of the stuff that we wanted to talk about were here, but Chris, what were you thinking coming out of that first discussion?
I was just gonna say I appreciated the setup on that, and you're right. We had a conversation at the recent ACT meeting. Shout out to our friends at Encova Insurance for hosting that, but it was at a broader level in trying to think about data strategy and how really as an industry we've spent a lot more time focusing on data. And in my travels, what I found is that, a lot of people want to embrace that conversation and usually come at it from a perspective that they think they're in a pretty good spot. And I think not too many years ago, data in our industry, particularly through the lens of an agency, meant that they had what they needed to get a rate and to provide underwriting information to their carriers. And that's very, very true. But as I know we can expand with you, and as we did on the panel, there's a broader perspective around data that we can start to think about, and how we can start to augment what we're doing with our policy transactional data to inform even more strategic decisions to allow independent agencies to succeed in different ways, and to make more specific decisions about how, when, and where they choose to expand or contract, or what niches they want to focus on, the people they want to hire, all of those types of things. And when you and I were chatting about it, this marketing dynamic, well, it's kind of a subset of all of that. What I really love about it is when you start to think about how marketing fits in, I think you'll agree with this, it connects to all of that, both on an input and an output perspective. So we'll probably talk broadly about data, but really specifically about how we can think about marketing your agency and what that might look like. And so a marketing guru is a great place to start with that. So
Well, Chris, what I think is actually really cool there is all those things that you were just talking about in terms of the data that agencies have kind of accessible to them. And I should tell everyone we're going to jump around and just talk about all of these things today. But all of that data that's there, and it's what they're using actually for underwriting, for what kind of niches they want to do, for hiring decisions. To your point, like that's marketing data as well, because that tells them who should they be marketing to, who's going to fit into the appetites of the carriers they're appointed with, who do they need to bring on to be able to like increase their productivity with kind of the right the right expense structure for that. It's all marketing data, as well as despite the fact that it's data from a bunch of different places, from within the agency and from within the industry.
Yeah, and yeah, the fact that it's in a lot of different places, I know is a pain point for any agency that's out there listening to, and maybe we can touch on that as well. But I think if we start to think about a question around how marketing and data are related, I mean, you can start at the 101, 201 level there. But one of the things that comes to mind when I saw that question, Stephanie, that you were kind of thinking about here and setting the stage, is that we've been talking for many, many years about how agencies are encouraged to have a niche or a specialization. There's a lot of generalists out there as well. And I think in Main Street and county seat type agencies, you almost have to be, but really developing an expertise in something like that. And this is where the data conversation comes in. And it's just
Absolutely.
a matter of when somebody says they have a niche in something, what does that actually mean? And how do you know you have a niche in that? And enjoying to write something, or even writing a lot of it, those are two things that are very much in line with having a niche in it. But data can actually support as to whether or not that niche is actually right for the agency. And I'd love to get your reactions to that statement.
um couldn't agree more. And I think it's interesting that you go back to the idea, do you like writing it, or do you write a lot of it, or where do those things go together? And you can have a niche that is really, really fun. For example, I saw someone, there's like four people who live on my street who all have like Vespa scooters that they park out in front. And I'm sure there is some agent in my neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, who might write all the Vespa scooters. That might be really fun. I cannot imagine that he or she is making a ton of money off of that. But there's probably data that says that this is a good neighborhood to do that in, because there are a lot of people who have them. Like that's all available there. So I think that's kind of the fun niche, and that's something that I think you could do is really additive to the rest of your business. The other thing is to say, I'm going to focus in on something where there's either a lot of volume, and I'm going to focus in on that, or it's truly more specialized, but you are, writing much greater premiums for that. And you can use the data around to kind of make that decision as well, and to decide, no, that's the way that you're going to drive your business forward. And for that, you've got things like all publicly available databases. You've got various demographic data. You've got what's in your AMS, and even I'm sure everyone out here has some kind of information that they're getting through Google. You can look at things like those search query volumes, and look at traffic to your website and say, you know what, I have an opportunity here. So I think that's a long way of just saying strongly agree, Chris.
Well, I don't know. I must have listened to too much Lex Friedman podcast. He always says, let's double click on that for a second and go a little bit deeper, because there's kind of two swim lanes for this. And there's sort of the market opportunity side
Mhm.
of this that you're alluding to. So what you already write in your agency or your firm, and what the market might present. The other part of it is whether or not operationally it makes sense, or if there's opportunities
Great.
to be more effective or efficient. And so thinking about how these connect, when we think about a niche, for example, or any real market opportunity, the power of data is being able to get inside your AMS and to use some other, if you don't have your hands on a third-party data tool, to at least to have some folks who can extract the data and start to look around and
Yeah.
do some deeper dives on classes of business, even beyond the niche, and just start to realize, is it operationally effective for me to participate in this
Hmm.
segment. It could be non-standard auto, it could be high value homes, it could be microbreweries, it could be, the one who writes the bird and the Vespa scooter
Yep.
things on Main Street. And all of those are things that need to be written. But it might give you the opportunity to separate from a line of business as well, based on
Hmm.
operational efficiency. You might uncover some areas where you're really effective operationally and didn't even really realize it. And then
Yeah.
you could start to then sequence the next set of steps where you look at, now what are the market opportunities? I mean, you might only write one or two of something, but for some reason it makes a lot of money. The loss ratio is good. It doesn't seem to cost you a lot of money, or comparably less money to manage those accounts.
Hmm.
So then you could start to look at those and say, now, how do I think about that from a marketing and a business development perspective, and go look at those types of things. So I think when we think about data connecting to marketing, I I look at it as going, both directions. What can you learn about your operations to fuel net new opportunities? And then where do you go find data to go grow from there? But also coming back the other way, should you or should you not even be operating in that segment of the industry in the first place?
100%. It is absolutely that two-way street. And I think the other thing that, as you're doing that research, looking at both what's, kind of within your current book and then without, where do you want to look to expand? Some of that is how effectively and efficiently can you market to that segment? If you've already got some inroads, if you've already got a little bit of practice, maybe bringing some of those new clients in, then you can build on that and continue to test on that, whether that's sending additional emails, whether that's maybe trying a bit of a direct mail strategy. Maybe it's sponsoring something local that caters to some of those customers or future customers. So there's things that you can start to do to kind of test into some of that based on the data that you already have. The other thing that you can do really is to look, as you're kind of exploring what might be next, is to look at kind of cost of entry, and that really becomes your cost of marketing. Are you going after something where, if you're standing up a small search engine marketing program and you don't want to spend a lot of money, if you're going up for search terms for around insurance, you may find yourself bidding against carriers, and none of us really are going to have the budgets to go up against the guys like Chris used to work for, right? So we have to think smartly about some of that marketing as well. And so, and then from there, it's kind of every little piece of data you get from this research. And I realize I'm talking a lot about research. It's not a very heavy lift. A lot of this is something that you can do in an afternoon, that you can, do on in between client calls, that you can kind of do little by little. It doesn't have to be a big, sit down and spend an entire week and lose that productivity time, that revenue generating time to do all of this. But you can get every little bit of research kind of leads you, I think, to the next thing of okay, this worked when I did it, this didn't, or this seems to have a lot of white space. Maybe we kind of test some tactics there, and then look at it to kind of come back and to help you define kind of where your next is.
Yeah, so I guess I am going to put you on the spot with this one. I'm
Yeah.
just kind of curious. So I think, thinking about the folks that are watching, this might make sense from an esoteric perspective. And I'd love to just maybe walk through, if there's a specific example you can think of
Mhm.
having worked with an organization, obviously all the efforts to anonymize the example aside, but take an agency out there that has decided that they want to pursue XYZ
Mhm.
class of business. And I think we can use the fulcrum from I want to do this, and what might it look like internally to figure out whether or not it makes sense. And
Yeah.
then once they've sort of validated that it does make sense, or they want to pursue it, what would the marketing and the external facing body of research and efforts look like to attract that customer? Is that a fair way to think about that? I know it's not perfectly binary, but that's the way I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I think we can definitely look at that like 30,000 feet, because obviously everything's going to be a little bit different depending on, the agency or where you're at right now. But I think that this is sort of something that's very fundamental, almost to the third question that we kind of have up on the screen now, that how do I bring data into my marketing strategy? That's almost taken to the next level. Your marketing strategy is part of your business strategy. So we're really kind of stacking the Russian dolls here, right? So I would say let's I brought it up earlier. Let's just keep talking about the scooters, right? So say that you want to think about you're gonna figure out, does it make sense to start to kind of really focus in on scooters. So I think the first thing is looking at what do you and your staff simply have capacity for. Are people like running super hot? Does it feel like everyone's just jumping from one thing to the next, and that there's enough brain space to be able to effectively focus on something new? Just knowing that that alone is going to take a little bit more focus than something that you're doing all the time. So I think number one is just kind of thinking about your people. Two is then thinking about your systems. Do you have everything set up where things are connected, where if you want to start doing say digital advertising for this, if once you've got someone in on it, how do you keep communicating to them? Do you have the capabilities built into your tech stack to do some of that marketing automation, to do some of that communication enablement once you've started go kind of moving into this? Because that will help make your entry a little bit easier, because you're not going to have to create something net new every single time. And I'll say that's an area where Agency Revolution has a lot of expertise and a lot of things that kind of work with the data that you have to make that data really functional. So that's kind of the second piece, is saying like, okay, yeah, I got a couple people, they can put some effort behind this. My tech stack can handle this. I've confirmed that at least one carrier that I'm appointed with is willing to write this in my area. Because I feel like that's a kind of a given, but just confirming. And then looking to see, is there demand in the marketplace? Are there enough scooters in your general area that you're gonna that the juice will be worth the squeeze, as I like to say. So like if the answer to all that is yes, then we kind of think about marketing, right? So there's
Can I
for kind of go
I
ahead.
just wanted to kind of, because I think you said a lot there, and I was just scribbling down some notes, and or maybe it's just me, but hopefully this helps kind of maybe with some context. So you talked about the people and maybe and the knowledge dynamic of that as well. I think that
Mhm.
an interest and a knowledge base aligned up with carrier appetite is a powerful thing as well. And I've seen those
Yeah.
conversations between agents and carriers sometimes where it's, well, you just tell us what you want to write and we'll go get it. And the carrier might come back and say, well, do you have an expertise in that to begin with?
Hmm.
And so this is where data can really help. And this is, we can call it data, or we can call it marketing data. I love your analogy that really all of these things are inside an overarching business strategy, but just taking a full inventory of what your current book of business profile looks like, what you've already done, and how you've been able to articulate some value in that space could be very powerful in talking back upstream to carriers about looking for resources and trying to get alignment in that regard. And also thinking about change management in your
Yeah.
organization as well. This is maybe more niche oriented, but even just in general, if you're starting to look at how do you start to deploy your presumably finite resources in your agency, and sometimes hard to acquire given the talent market today, how do
Hmm.
you maximize their time, effort, and energy? Sometimes it is focusing in on the things that generate the most value for the
Yeah.
business. And this is, again, we're getting your arms around the data and what's the hit ratios, what commissions do you get paid, what's the
Mhm.
highest, say, revenue per customer or account, and those types of things, where you can start to look at how much it costs you to write the business versus how much revenue it generates. These things don't oftentimes get coupled with marketing, but they're
Yeah.
critical to marketing, right? You don't want to grow in an area if operationally it costs you money.
Absolutely.
So that's
Yeah.
why I'm hyper focused on that, and I apologize if I'm dwelling on it, but I think it's really important to think inside those terms. And this is kind of getting your house in order before you put a new addition on, so to speak,
Mm.
if we use a really bad metaphor. And then now you can start to say, do I have anybody that even cares about riding the scooters?
Yeah.
And
And
here's why we want to grow into that market. And then you
mhm.
can start to go learn the other stuff. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
pause there. And I guess if you had any additional comments on that, or if anybody had a chat to toss into the question, by all means, we could elaborate on that. But as you
Yeah.
can tell, I'm a huge advocate of kind of understanding what you got and
Mhm.
building from a set of principles and financial principles that help make the agency successful and viable over time.
And I'll double click on what you were saying. And that's where, as we think about your available data, and that's really where your marketing technology tools come into play. And I feel like in this case, I'm saying marketing technology, or, if I want to get really like wonky about it, your MarTech stack. It's not just that. It includes kind of all of the data that you have around. So if we think about your easily available marketing data, that's not just what you're getting from your email client that's saying, this sort of subject line has the most open rates, or, we got X number of hard bounces. It's not just what you're getting out of your Google dashboards or your social media, dashboards, because that's all data that's easily available, right? Your AMS data, the data that you have about your customers, about your prospects, the data that you have about the area, in which you live and work, the data that you have from your carriers, that's all, readily available marketing data. So, Chris, as you were kind of talking, that connectivity, that idea that, you need to be in a place where, as you're thinking about adding new data sources, as you're thinking about adding new technologies, you want to be in a place where they can talk to each other, and you're really working with partners who can integrate with each other pretty easily. Again, I'll do another shameless plug. For us here, we integrate with all the major AMSs, and like for us, that's important from a marketing side of things, because that integration, that data connectivity allows agents to be able to communicate much more effectively. So kind of going from what you were saying, that idea that data is all around you is true. You just have to make sure that you're in a place to best utilize it before you go running.
Yeah, and starting off with some of those basic questions that you would be managing to anyways as a business owner or an operational leader type in an agency is really important. 3, 5, 6, 7 core metrics that you would be looking at anyways, and then thinking about how do you translate that into now what I think is more traditionally viewed of as marketing. And I want to go
Hmm.
out and tell the industry that we can do this and we're here to help and get it in the hands of the right people and create a process by which you can attract customers and hopefully write those that are out there. And so we could probably ramble on about the internal operations, but it's the way I view it. Again, Stephanie, we didn't use this visual before, but I kind of view it as just this continual cycle of you always have to
Yeah.
continually doing this process where you're evaluating what your assumptions are when you begin, which are all those things we talked about. Go out, try,
Hmm.
learn, and grow. Take the data you're learning along the way and continue to iterate. But
Yep.
let's kind of go then and make a pivot external.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Chris, basically what you're talking about is the test and learn cycle. And that's something that, as someone who's kind of, I'll say, fully devoted to marketing, I'm doing all the time. And that's something that I'm encouraging my team to do. For us at Agency Revolution, we are doing some kind of test and learn with almost every marketing deployment that we do. We are testing, for example, in emails, we are moving our call to action buttons around. We're testing different subject lines. We're testing different friendly froms. That's a little bit inside baseball. So when you get an email and you see, maybe today it's from Stephanie at Agency Revolution. The next one might say it's from Agency Revolution. We're seeing what that does. And then we look at something and we iterate. So, what you kind of came around to was part of that is a big part of that external strategy for marketing. It's you're going to take data you have and you're going to try something. And some things are just not going to work. And that is kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to marketing. There are things that just you feel really good about them. You're really excited about the message, about the opportunity, and it just doesn't resonate. So you take that as a learning. You say, okay, we don't do that again. And you move on and you try something else. One way to kind of mitigate that is, again, to look at kind of what you have on hand for your data and think about your targeting and think about what is the message that I want to send to whom. And that is for, all deployments. That is for all channels for marketing. Think about kind of what do I want to say to whom? And then the next piece is, and why should they care? So that's where we really kind of get to bring in, how do you get someone to get engaged with what you're doing? And that's where it's that, why do you care? And that is for whether you're sending out direct mail, that is whether you are doing some kind of digital campaign, that's in social, that's marching in the 4th of July parade. All of those things kind of go back to the what, what, who, and why. And when we go back to our kind of launching a new piece of business for you, that's the same thing. And I think if you kind of line up those 3 fundamental questions, you can effectively market and launch a new business, new line of business for yourself. So, there's some other sub questions in there, like, what's my audience size? And that's part of it. And kind of going back to that test and learn loop, start small. You don't have to test everything to your entire audience or your entire identified segment. Pick off 10% and see if something works. That's a great way to test small without spending your whole budget. And then you can kind of keep growing it and keep adjusting.
Stephanie, let's do this. We had a question pop up, and
Yeah.
it's a fair question, right? We were talking about some bigger concepts here, perhaps, and not having a full perspective on the demographics of the audience. The question essentially was this sounds like it might be more in tune to the capabilities of an agency that has a dedicated marketing professional. And smaller and smaller agencies are investing in it. That's something that we could spend some time on, but thinking about somebody who's trying to take this from within and do this without maybe core expertise built within their organization. And this is an agency owner or some frontline folks who are just trying to do a little bit better each day. And then to think about maybe some more fundamental practices. And then I love this next question is then, because this is where I think we were going to go. I think Tom Farrell, you asked this question is, so we can talk about some fundamental practices, maybe some tactical things that smaller agencies or agencies without a dedicated marketing person could think about. And part of it is, how does this reflect to the way newer generations are making buying decisions, which is really the exact trajectory we were taking the conversation.
So start with the first one, and then we can kind of weave it into the second. I think some of that is, we're trying to think 30,000 feet here, and then how do we narrow that down? The tactics are the tactical concepts are really, I think they're really the same. It's really, thinking about what do you want to tell people, and who are you trying to talk to, and then kind of what's going to make them buy in. And that's something that you can do on a really small and targeted scale and doesn't need to be a 100% full-time job. To Chris's point, I think that's something that Chris, you'd said you'd seen in a kind of starting kind of to be on a macro scale, that people are investing more in marketing sooner in the growth of their business, perhaps than in previous years. But if you're taking, say, 5 hours a week to think about marketing, I still say you start with the same questions and just kind of doing everything on a smaller scale and utilizing, I'll say, native tools to what you have. As an insurance agent, you've probably got a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page, and you've activated your Google My Business. Those three things alone, you can manage those really, really effectively with just a few hours a week, and you'll still get really good data back. If you're sending emails, you will get data back from that in terms of, click-throughs and engagement. So I would say, look at the concepts, just shrink them down, right size them for you, because good marketing isn't dependent on the size of the business. It isn't dependent on the possible reach. It really always comes down to, am I telling the right people the things that they need to hear in a way that is going to make them care? And you can do that without any kind of big outlay of time or money. And I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I guess one of the things too I hear from smaller organizations, or maybe not even size specific, but folks who are starting to enter, they hear and they get intimidated by the words like work on your SEO and these types of
Mhm.
things. I think it marries up these two questions, right? How are next generation buyers? They're doing searches, they're looking at social proof, and they need to be finding you. And if they don't find you on the first page,
Right.
I know that, given my demographic, I wouldn't even have the slightest idea really where to begin if I wanted to create, some search engine optimization here. So
Mhm.
I'm just trying to think if there are any sort of practical little nuggets about here's a tool, here's a way,
Yeah.
here's something. Certainly they could partner with you guys, but I mean, just even thinking more kind of on the ground level.
hmm so other than Forge websites, which are a great way to kind of have some of that built in, you can hire a consultant. I'll say for kind of a 1 or 2 time fee, if you really want to start just very small. My I'll say my warning on that is, you might find yourself as you grow kind of wanting to add in new capabilities, which might require some new SEO. So that could get to be more of an ongoing cost than you might think of if you really are trying to start small. I'm an advocate for wait a minute, do it right the first time, which again kind of brings you back to something more like a Forge style platform. But other things that you can do is again use what's in front of you. Google has some really great built-in tools. One thing that I'm going to tell everyone here to do is activate your Google My Business. Get that on there. Get yourself in the 3-pack. Like, you know, take a couple hours this week if you haven't done it yet. Like Friday afternoon, go for it. There's good tutorials on how to do it actually from Google as well. So I'd say that's like the summer homework before 101. And
So yeah, I love it. And thank you folks for asking questions, right? I mean, the goal here is we could talk forever at any level. And if there's things you want to know. So there's two questions here. I think two of them are kind of combined and one of them is on their own. So there's a question about consultant around helping with SEO. There's a couple of marketing firms, obviously.
mhm,
Agency Revolution does it. Client Circle is another ACT partner. So hopefully you don't mind us mentioning a competitor on your show. There's a couple there, but in all likelihood, there's a local marketing firm
mhm,
in most towns who helps with these kind of things. And your local state Big I probably has some relationships as well. And
yep,
another agent who you have a friendly rapport with can probably offer some of that. A few years ago, SEO did take some very sophisticated, very specific training, but now there's marketing firms in most county seat towns that are really good at helping small businesses find a placement in the sea of internet searches that are happening out there and to have you show up the right way.
yep,
It'll take a little bit of work about here's what we're trying to serve. Go back to the front side of the conversation. Here's the client we're trying to serve. Here are things that matter. You don't want to put to the other question here, get the cheapest quote, get 19 quotes. We'll help you with the best price, unless that's your value prop, because those are the kind of things that an SEO company will feed in so that when
Mhm.
somebody's searching for those, you can get there. And so there's a way to do that. I would also, it's shameless plug, I'm dumb luck. I am wearing the trustedchoice.com thing. Trustedchoice.com is a place where you can go build an agent profile as a Big I member and have a profile that they're in control some of the way you show up. And trustedchoice.com drives the SEO search for your agency based on the community you're in. So it's a pretty cool thing. And if you want to learn more about that, reach out to me. I can connect you with some folks there.
And
But it's
there
interesting.
was, yeah.
I get, yeah. So I want to acknowledge these too, because there's a couple of questions here that are together around the buyer in an online
Mhm.
environment. And I think you could talk about, you and I were having a conversation. There's an agent that I've gotten to know in my prior life who through COVID went back to traditional postcards
Mhm.
and newspapers and local radio spots, traditional. And it was the same old stuff. Hey, we're here. We care. We're live human beings. We
Yep.
know the world's complex. Give us a call. I mean, it's the traditional way that many of us grew up, and they are crushing it.
Yeah.
But so I'm saying a lot here just to address the questions here, but I'd love if you could kind of respond to the buyer you see in a digital environment and how that's
Oh my gosh, you
evolving
bet.
today. So yeah, I'll stop.
Yeah, so the first, I guess, to take it one half step back, the other thing I would just tell everyone with SEO is be patient. I think in that kind of rush where that you mentioned, Chris, a couple of years ago, everyone was like SEO. A lot of us got into our heads that SEO means you have to tinker with it all the time. Like you're constantly having to be there. Like SEO it's a waiting game. So just keep that in mind as you kind of go down that path. And now, as you think about the buyer, one of the reasons, like I've always been a champion of, I'll say, multi-channel marketing. If we want to, get real nerdy on it. Um, but there are a number of studies that actually have shown that young millennials and into kind of the older folks in Gen Z respond really, really well to that traditional marketing, those things that, we all walked away from for 10, 15 years. And there's a number of hypotheses about that. Some of it is that it's part of the kind of personalized experiences that they've kind of curated for themselves over time, where if they get a mailer that, speaks specifically to, them, whether it's something that looks like their neighborhood on the picture, if it's someone that's got two dogs in the picture and they have a dog, like that actually is resonating as feeling very authentic. And it's also because we are inundated with digital stuff all the time. And all of that native data is right there, but there's some additional skepticism around some of that. Now, what I will say is none of these things work in a vacuum. To get your postcards and radio to work, you still need to have that reminder through Google, through social, through something else online. And that's really where you see it. And as we think about kind of looking at Tom's questions about the younger buyer and who's buying from online resources, there's a lot of overlap there. I mean, these are people who are getting, fed Instagram ads regularly about, online purchasing, and it takes 5 minutes and costs $5 and do this. They may be price only, and quite frankly, until something goes wrong. And then they're going to be looking back for the expertise of an agent. And that's really where you have the technology and the human coming together. And that's where, you might miss this person the first time around, even if you have great marketing. The minute something goes wrong, they're going to be back on there looking for you. And that's where your marketing can pick them up.
It's interesting, the power of social. I've long heard marketing professionals, especially when they talk about social, is use social to kind of build a brand and tell the story about who you are and what it would like to be a part of, like the extended family
Yeah.
there. It's less about like a direct call to action, call me for a better price, but here's what we do. And here's how we're involved in the community. And meet Stefanie. She's our CSR. And, here's
Hmm.
what we did with the local, chamber. And then your direct call to action, emails or postcards or traditional marketing can help call. But the question about price shoppers is interesting, right? The independent agency channel, is it continuing to grow market share in
Hmm.
a world where more and more digital capabilities are out there? So this notion that every consumer is looking for a low, no touch, no human interaction experience, I think is being challenged a little bit. And that is, of course, through a period of time, the pandemic that we experienced, and a point in time where a lot of some insurtech dollars, or early on ways, at least, were kind of pointed at the fact that both carriers and agents weren't adding the value. And even through all of that, the independent channel is out there. So articulating value and
Hmm.
adding value and that consultative approach, I mean, this is complex. And I think
Yeah.
acknowledging that is a really important thing. And I think, to your point, though, the thing about SEO that I think you said was, a lot of people think if they invest in keyword searches, that like tomorrow they're going to be, inundated with leads. I think it's a slow build, like everything. You remember the old direct mail statistics? If you got
Yeah.
1% response rate, I mean, you would know the statistics better than I am, but think about marketing as a longer
Yeah.
game.
Ab- oh, absolutely. I would say the old seven touch rule that we had in marketing is still very true. That's, you need to engage with someone, whether, basically they need to see your name 7 times before they remember it. They need to have that kind of that seven touch, um, on average, for them to like get you. And that's still true. We just have a lot more channels to do those touches in now. And, I also think, as we think about kind of younger consumers or digital first consumers, because they really could be any age, there's a greater understanding that, expertise is valued. I work in the insurance industry. I know insurance pretty well. I worked with an independent agent for my entire adult life because I am not an expert, even though I'm in the industry. And I think that that mindset is one that's actually starting to catch on more with some of those younger shoppers, because they realize that, like, we're not all good at everything. Let's be real.
Important. Yeah, I think, you kind of frame this as like a 45 or 50-minute conversation. So I love the fact that we got some questions to address and
Hmm.
spend all day long on the generational buying side of things. But I'm, just trying to connect this back to the data
Yeah.
theme that you proposed here, was, though, I think that when we look at an agency out there, you don't have to take you don't have to, what's the analogy? You don't have to eat the elephant in one bite.
Hmm.
Try something a little bit different. Test a belief. Hey, we would like to write more X,
Right.
or, and here's a couple things that we think might work. It could be an ad in the local homes
Hmm.
newspaper. It could be a radio spot. It could be participating in a different event. But the key here is to track some expense that goes into that. How many people you were able to touch, how many of those
Yep.
people you were able to turn into a prospect or a quoted opportunity, and what your close ratio was. It's these incremental elements of data that over
Hmm.
time will start to allow you to build a story, and objectively decide whether this is where you want to put more energy, more money, maybe more people, or it wasn't worth the time, to do that. And so the idea here is, I think a lot of people market and they build a Facebook page, they send things out, and they don't always know what or whether it worked. And I know even people that send out postcards and they put a tiny little code in the corner of it.
Hmm.
And even with every inbound call, for example, every inbound inquiry, it's, how did you hear about us? Oh, I got your
Yep.
postcard. I saw your billboard, or I heard you. Those are the kind of things that let you know whether you're spending money in the appropriate way. And then what clients did you write from that? And
Hmm.
it starts to connect this story about how your actions as an agency do or don't connect to the business results you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of bring it back. And with that, Christy mentioned quantitative and qualitative. And those are both valid data sets. You really, again, if you have to like pick one in terms of figuring out your returns, go with your quant, but they're both really important. Like ask people where you hear things from, how are they finding out about you? And then everything you do, like create a measurement mindset. That's kind of my little, phrase for it, but it's a measurement mindset. When you're sending things out, and note how many you sent. That's for, emails, that's for direct mailers, that's really anything that's going out. When you know, do a post on LinkedIn, just look at your engagement statistics, look at some of your clicks, because again, that's all native data in there. You don't need to invest in anything to look just like that. If you run a campaign through your communication software, that's all available to you. So look at everything should come with a measurement. And once you set up that framework, it's not a lot of additional effort. It's not a lot of additional time to be able to maintain it. And I'd say my favorite acronym in all of business is ROMI. It's your return on marketing investment. So you can calculate that by looking at the spend of your campaign, and then kind of what it brought in, basically. And you want to try and break even, kind of general baseline for success. I like to see a 2.5 ROMI for something to say, hey, this is a really good tactic, a really good execution. So that's where I like to look. But think about your returns on marketing investment.
Yeah, I like that. So I was thinking about that. What's a bogey? If I spend $1 that you can
Hmm.
clearly, allocate towards a marketing or a business development expense, how would I even know whether it's effective or not? You could compare A versus B, but
Yep.
both could be good or both could be bad relative. So
Hmm.
that 2.5%. I was thinking about a very tactical example, and this goes back a couple of years, and it's a challenge or an opportunity to think creatively about how and what you might learn from an opportunity. And so this was an agency that I'm thinking of that had 4 CSR account exec type roles, and they kind of handled their clients in totality divided by the alphabet. Pretty common and relatively standard operating model in a lot of agencies, particularly smaller ones. It's worked for years and it still works today. Well, this agency was trying to do a cross-sell campaign. Maybe it was
Hmm.
umbrellas or something like that. And they did it over a period of time and asked the staff to make 5 outbound calls and blah, 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 blah. Well, and they would offer some sort of bonus to each person. Well, they noticed that a couple of people were bonusing more than others, but overall they were happy. Well, at the end of the year, they went back and looked at it and started to identify that um, over week over week over week over week, a couple of folks were out cross-selling the other two, and it created
Yep.
this weird imbalance in their book. And so, should you get an umbrella based on the last letter of the first letter of your last name? And I don't mean that to be to be flippant. What they found is that the staff's capabilities and talents were
Hmm.
starting to emerge. So they had a couple of staff members that really loved the chase and were
Hmm.
challenged and motivated to call, and they liked that. Others were very, very much service oriented and were very uncomfortable making that outbound call, but they were phenomenal if the customer called then. So they started to reallocate the way they even designed the roles and
Yeah.
to let people's talents flourish on both sides. And that was a very unintended, but very financially and business results oriented positive outcome from a marketing
Hmm.
test. People were happy in their job, they enjoyed it. And now sort of the spread of opportunity across the customer base was even higher. I'm looking at another question here.
Yeah.
There's a specific question about Fuse that you would definitely have to answer, and then can be time efficient.
Let's
Here,
let's
please.
tackle time efficient. So
Perfect.
we can be time efficient. And Ben, we should be able to pull up your contact information and respond to you afterwards if we don't get to it quite on this one. Um, but I love this idea of being time efficient with marketing strategy planning. So, coming from the idea that you've already done some testing, you've found a niche, you've found some good content. So this is where you get into things like this is where you're going to maximize the use of the tools that you have. So this is where I would point to a solution like Fuse first, where you can work or you can schedule things, where you can pull from existing content and work on deploying that, where you can kind of set up triggered campaigns, you can really do it as a set it and forget it if you want. If you don't want to kind of invest in a solution like that, then there are other things that you can do in terms of scheduling things out. Your social tools will mostly have scheduling capabilities built in. If you don't want to invest in something else for that, um, you can work on a calendar. My team, we work off of some shared calendars, and I actually like sometimes I just build spreadsheets to say here's where it's going to be, so that way everyone knows. They look in the morning and they see like what's supposed to be emailed that way. You can color code it depending on whose responsibility it might be or something like that. But kind of once you've gotten the sense of like what's working, then it's utilizing your tools to either really go the automation route, or you can think about it a little bit more manually and like have it planned, and that way it kind of becomes a no-brainer. The additional step with going the second way is just knowing that maybe it's like the third Thursday of every month is the day that you don't take meetings because you are working on your content.
That's a yeah, and I like where you're going with that, Stephanie, and I think maybe even sort of at a more rudimentary level, shifting the mindset in the agency that marketing is not an event and it's an
Mm-hmm.
operational process,
Yes.
so that it is whoever in your organization is going to have some accountability for. So you mentioned the content calendar, so everybody knows on Tuesdays and Thursdays there's a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post or an Instagram
Yep.
post, who does it, and those types of things. And then if they're just like, if there's who's checking the morning download, who's checking the commission statements, who's doing accounts receivables and payable, those are operational steps that are a part of somebody's function. And after a period of time, so it's a way of creating efficiency and role clarity. So if it's
Yeah.
everybody's job, it's nobody's job, kind of a thing. So having a couple people that might have some interest, if it's not a core capability, it might be a way for them to grow and develop and do something more for the agency, or if it is why they're there. But I think building it in to that there's a standardized process for these things, and it will eventually become part of muscle memory and a rote process.
Mm-hmm.
And that also gives you data. So are we not on
Yeah.
time? We're doing the thing on what do we get more opens on Tuesdays than Thursdays? Oh, let's
Mm-hmm.
try Mondays and Wednesdays. So having standardization process creates efficiency, and it also gives you a built-in data point.
Yeah. And just to that, Chris, real quick, like as we're talking about testing, I mean, simply testing time of day that you send, like that's a great test. I mean, I know we went like really, really high level to start, but we're going to talk like simple tactical. Um, Try one week you send in the morning and the next week you send in the afternoon. Like testing is as easy as that. So I would say kind of don't overthink it too much. What do you think about sharing some stats with the folks to kind of close it out, just some food for thought, and then
Yeah, I would say you prepared some pretty compelling and some powerful thoughts here that won't take very long for those that are still on the call to work through here, that will just kind of give some energy around this notion. And I'll turn it over to you, Stephanie.
so just kind of thinking big picture, but this is from a McKinsey study that recently came out where they said marketing leaders don't just adopt financial lingo for their interactions with other leaders. They incorporate quantitative rigor as well as profit and loss accountability into every decision they make. And with that, that's not just marketing leaders, that's really everyone who touches marketing. It's thinking about what does that mean for the business. But here's really what I wanted to share in terms of statistics. So those are drawn from some Gartner studies as well as one done by HubSpot. But companies can unlock 2 to 5% additional growth if they rethink marketing around that ROI and value creation. So that's your ROMI calculation right there. If you are thinking about doing your ROMI calculation with all of your activities, there's significant growth that you can unlock. You know, for larger scale companies, but still very relevant as it trickles down, 67% of CMOs report that marketing data can feel overwhelming. Like there's so much out there. And that's where we really kind of get down to, eat the elephant one bite at a time. But it's use the data that you already have in front of you first. You don't have to worry about seeking everything out, and everything should not be the goal anyway. You should look to get good data that's going to be useful for you.
I look at
And
it
then
like
we think about,
running, Stephanie, real
yeah,
quick. You and I are both, we both enjoy running. It's like, just take one more step tomorrow than you took
yep,
today. It's not, you don't have to hop off the couch and go straight to a 5K or a 10K. So just
nope,
one little thing different and just see if it worked.
yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna steal that analogy. I love that, because if you try to go into a full sprint, like you're gonna hurt yourself, and that's the same thing for business. You start throwing all your marketing dollars at something you don't know, bad for everybody. We're talking about 7 touches before. The average person checks into 7 social networks of some kind every month. And you're not going to hit them on all of them, but that means that simply being present on social gets you one of those touches. And again, the social platforms all have really good kind of native measurement tools. So this is one. 150 percentage points is the amount of incremental growth that companies who invest in growth marketing can achieve over sector periods. And the reason that I want to point this one out is we're in a hard market right now. And when you start to do these little investments in marketing, this is really where it starts to pay off, is afterwards. So as others are pulling back on marketing, using your data and being really smart about the marketing investments you make is going to put you significantly ahead, even in this hard market. And this is where we get into automation. And I know I've mentioned that a couple of times, and that's really, getting into, it's your senior year seminar perhaps, but it does help you to be very, very efficient and effective as you think about what your future state will be, and the data that you can utilize in and out of that is really good. And then, email is cheap, but email is effective. So there are actually a couple of cited studies that all had, around this number. Spend $1 on email, you can get up to $36 back kind of on that marketing spend. So, talk about a return on marketing investment. I'm saying shoot for 2.5, that's 36. There you go. So those are just some interesting stats, I think, to consider as you think about your marketing strategy. We are right up at the end. I want to do a quick plug, and I'll throw it over to Chris for a quick plug for you. We have a webinar next week on artificial intelligence that's done in partnership with IANB. We've got our pit stop, which is about NPS. You want to talk about marketing data? NPS is a great one. That will be on the 14th. And at the end of the month, you can come back for kind of round 2 of kind of marketing pointers from AR, and we'll be doing one on social media best practices. Chris, what do you have to plug?
I'd just say, if you're all interested in getting involved with the Big I, get connected with your state if you're not already plugged in, and learn all the resources that are available at the state level and the national level. Everybody there is infinitely passionate about the health of the independent agency channel, and we want to hear from you, and we'd love to have you be involved and participate and share and take advantage of the tools that are out there. And this is just one of an infinite number of things across a ton of different topics. So just appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this, Stefanie, and your support. And thanks to everybody who joined in, stuck around, and is watching this perhaps off of a recorded setup. Thank you so much.
We're grateful for your partnership and for your insights and expertise as well. Thank you so much, everyone who stayed on a little long with us. Have a great rest of your days, and we'll see you back soon.